Hi everybody. Today we're here to talk about how to avoid physical and emotional breakdowns as a caregiver. What can you do early in the caregiving journey? What can you do throughout the caregiving journey as things get more difficult? And what on earth should you know in the first place? So stay with me for these tips. I'm Pamela D Wilson. My website is PamelaDWilson.com. On there is a lot of helpful information. There are over 800 videos here on YouTube. Please like this video. Please follow my channel so that you can receive more tips and information. The first thing that I want to talk about is the challenges that caregivers face, and there is an unlimited list, right? But I'm going to talk about one of them. It's thinking that caregiving might be this short-term project. A lot of caregivers will say to me, well, Pamela, I was going to go do this for 6 months, and now it's 5 years later. It's 10 years later. It's 20 years later, and I'm still here, and my life has passed me by, right? So it's important to say to yourself, if you're going to accept the job of a caregiver, how long can I do this? How long am I willing to do this? What is realistic? Now, I know there's some caregivers who are going to say, Pamela, I didn't have a choice. There was nobody else who was going to do it. I will tell you that caregiving is a choice that you make for your own reasons, right? To trade other parts of your life. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, my sister is the caregiver for my parents, and she does everything, and she doesn't complain. And I said, well, gosh, that's interesting. What motivates your sister? And this person said, well, my sister got into a lot of trouble when she was young. She was in and out of jail. My parents took care of her. And now today, my sister feels that this is her payback. It's her way to give back to our parents by taking care of them. So caregivers who say, I didn't have a choice, I had to do this. Ask yourself, what's your motivation? What's the motivation behind that so you can understand why you're doing it? Because sometimes you may end up giving up years of your life to do this. Make sure that your reasons for doing it are important to you and that they make sense so that you don't feel resentful or angry at other people who can't help, right? So a lot of caregivers get into this, right? Because they're just naive. They don't realize it's going to take years and they want to be helpful, but they don't see the long-term effects of being helpful. Like maybe I can't get married. Maybe I can't go to college. Maybe I can't, move across the country and take this dream job, right? We have to look at what caregiving is, how long it lasts, and the effects on our life. The other challenge in caregiving is to realize that we can't control the outcome, no matter how hard we work, no matter how much help we give our parents, right? The outcome in many ways is going to be the same. Our parents are going to pass away. We as adults are going to eventually pass away, right? We can't stop that aspect of death. We can do a lot of great things in the middle, but we have to kind of reconcile ourselves with the fact that, everybody dies, and we have to be at peace with our contributions and the efforts that we put into caring for loved ones and how that all works out. The number 2 challenge in caregiving is how to recognize what your parent or grandparent or sibling is experiencing, right? When you're perfectly healthy and your life is pretty good, right? I call this growing the skill of empathy. And empathy is trying to understand what somebody else is going through when you have absolutely no idea what they're going through. And the easiest way to talk about this with caregivers is the people on the outside who are not caregiving. And they look at you and they say, how hard can that be? I don't know why you're complaining about your parents. Really? Like, this is too much for you? And you're thinking, oh my God, you have no idea what I'm going through, right? You have to take that experience and put that on the person who needs care. You have absolutely no idea what struggles they go through daily, especially if they have health issues, to get out of bed, to maybe do some exercise, to make a meal, to bathe. What are the physical challenges? And more importantly, for both the caregiver and the care receiver, the emotional challenges that people have to go through day after day, week after week, month after month, just to get through all of this. It is not easy, right? And the challenge is that we're just not a society that talks about all this caregiving and all the emotional struggles and getting sick and everything, because healthcare treats sick people, right? Healthcare doesn't teach you how to be healthy. So as the caregiver and as the person who needs care, what we're struggling with is this loss of independence, the loss of, oh my gosh, I used to be able to do this and today I can only do like this much, and it's the pits, right? So part of being empathetic is to say, gosh, I can't understand how this feels for you, right? Or if you've had a similar experience, I do understand it. I understand that you may have different feelings about it, and I know that I can't fix it, but how can we work through this together? You know, it's easy for you to say, oh, everything's going to be all right, when everything may not really be all right, you know? Some people may just want you to listen, or they may want help from you in like, how do I make this better? How do I solve problems? So part of being empathetic is to say, well, how can I help you? How do you want to be helped? And if you're the person receiving help, you could also say, well, gosh, I so appreciate everything you're doing, but this would be really more helpful for me than this. So kind of help your caregiver understand how to help you. And then with all of this, whether you're the caregiver or the care receiver, there's all these feelings, right? Guilt, anger, frustration, feeling isolated, feeling resentful. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these emotions can have foundations, right? But the best way to manage guilt is to not, if you're the caregiver, don't allow others to put ideas in your head that you're not good enough or that the effort that you're contributing is not helping, right? Because regardless of what you're doing, if you're there and you're showing up every day or every week or every month, you're helping. You have to value yourself enough so that you don't feel guilty. Because caregivers, just like everybody else, you know, we're all trying to do the best we can. The problem is we all have different life experiences and we have different skills. Some of us are good at this and we're not good at that. And the things we do either work out or they don't work out. It's not an easy path to be a caregiver, right? So it's important to do your best to maintain a positive attitude, a positive mind. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself the grace of saying, you know, I'm doing the best I can. You know, this is all I can do, and I appreciate myself for it, and I'm glad that I can do these things, right? But maybe I can't do more, right? Maybe I'm limited to this, and I've got to be honest with the person that I care for about what I can do. And then the other aspect is expectations, right? Aging parents expect you to do things. As caregivers, you may have expectations of your parents. So another recent experience, I was talking to a caregiver the other day who's moving parents into an assisted living community, and they're like, oh my gosh, it is so much work. I'm having to move furniture and get the house sold and clean things and coordinate all this medical care and all this. And you know, can you believe this? My parents haven't said thank you. And I said to this person, I said, you know what? You're an absolute angel. It's important for you to recognize your efforts and to realize that everything that you're doing is because your parents can't do it themselves. And they may be so overwhelmed by the idea of moving and leaving their house after 40 years. And they may be so overwhelmed about their health problems. And maybe your dad's worried about your mom, and your mom's worried about your dad, and they're worried about dying and all of these things and how they're going to pay for all this. Honestly, the last thing they're thinking about is, thank you for helping me make this move that scares me to death, right? So the caregiver has this expectation of receiving thanks. The parents, they're in a totally different place. They're in a place of worry and fear and all these other things. So it's easy for us to put our expectations on other people and be angry when they don't give us what we want or what we think we should have. That's a big one in caregiving. You know, we think that our siblings should help out. We think that our parents should be more appreciative. We think that our parents should do this. We think that our spouse should be more considerate of what we're doing. Well, all that goes out the window when you're a caregiver. You can only control what you think and what you do. You can't control other people, how they're going to respond to you, how they're going to react to you, your expectations. If you have expectations, you need to lay them out. Mom or Dad, if I do this, it would be nice to receive a thank you every now and then. Or, you know, your parents, gosh, if you're going to help me, it might be good if you would ask me how I want to be helped. This caregiving thing is a two-way street, and many times it gets so lopsided and we just can't see it. So we're suffering all of this physical and emotional distress and health breakdowns, and you're stressed and you get sick. So through all of this, it's important to look at how you solve problems and how you cope through stress, especially when things are good. So I'm going to use an example like your roof, right? Let's say you're going to fix your roof because there's this little thing going on. So you fix your roof when there's not like a huge roofing problem, right? At the time there's a roofing problem and and you have all these problems, that is not the time to think about like, oh gosh, what would I have done to need to prepare for this so it's not so bad, right? We have to take care of our physical and our emotional health when it's pretty good, so that when things get really bad, we know how to cope and we know what to do and we know how to keep ourselves healthy, right? So look at your problem solving and coping abilities. Look at the patterns in your life and work to become mentally and physically strong before you really need to become mentally and physically strong. And if possible, understand why self-care is important. So I have caregivers who say, Pamela, I don't have time for self-care. I can't do that. I'm too busy. I have all these other things to do. They're not in a place where they're willing to either help themselves do self-care or understand why self-care is important, right? Because they can't see what happens if you don't do self-care. You as the caregiver might get sick. You might get sicker than the people that you care for. You might not be able to care for your parents anymore. You might end up in the hospital, right? They can't see that far in front. And so part of being a caregiver is to like see beyond the next hill and the next hill and the next hill and what can happen, and to be prepared and have plans and options for all of these things. So depending on where you are, addressing your physical and your emotional health can not be important, or it can be very important. You know, if you're somebody who's surviving to just pay the bills and co-pays and prescriptions, you know, you're not thinking about self-care. You're thinking about, how am I going to eat tomorrow? How am I going to pay the electric bill? All of that. There's ways to get through that by seeking help from community organizations and other caregiving groups and other supports, right? You don't have to feel like you're alone if you're at that stage, nor do you have to feel like you're alone if you're not so worried about paying that copay, but you're like, oh my gosh, how do I help my parent with dialysis or chemotherapy or taking their blood sugar or all these health problems that they're having, or they seem to have dementia or delirium and we can't figure out what the heck's wrong. What are we going to do here? So it's how you can help yourself, right? And it's the mental perspective of that shift of, oh, this is bad, or, oh, I'm glad this happened, so we have time to fix it, right? And to just give you a silly example, right? So let's say you're driving on the freeway and somebody cuts you off and you're like, oh, that jerk, right? Or you're in line and somebody cuts in front of you and you're all angry about that too, right? And then a little time goes on and your perspective shifts and you're like, oh, wow, because maybe you were that person at one point, right? And you're like, oh, that person cut me off. Wow, you know, you're sitting back and you're thinking, they must be in a real hurry. Let them go in front of me. I'm good with that, right? Because you once were in that position of, oh my gosh, I'm in a hurry. I've got to get through this. I've got to get it done. And maybe you ignored other people and you cut in line in front of them, right? So as life goes on, we gain these life experiences and perspectives when we've been in the shoes of other people that help us be more empathetic and manage all of these physical and emotional challenges. So the way that we respond to things is basically how we see ourselves. You know, are we capable of managing through this, or are we so stressed that we just can't even think of anything else, right? It's also how much we want to control situations. You know, are we very particular, or are we okay in saying, you know what, hey, if you can help me, I'll take whatever help you can give me. I'm just appreciative of getting the help, versus telling a brother or sister, well, you have to come over and I need you to do these 10 things and you can do this and you can't do this, and, you know, you're going to drive me crazy if you do these things, right? So it's like, how much control do you want and how much help do you really want? Then we have to ask ourselves, you know, our style, right? Are we constantly dwelling on the negatives of the situation? How have we solved problems in the past? What skills have we had? What skills might we need to build to solve more complicated problems in the future? Do we tend to blame somebody else for everything that happens, or do we take personal responsibility? If we're doing something, what's the motivation to do it, right? So when you understand yourself and why you do things and your motivations and your stresses, only then can you take a step back and think about, what do I want to do? What are my intentions for today? What plan do I need to create to help myself manage through these stresses better? Because I can tell you when you get to that point and you realize, I got to take care of myself today. I got to do something for myself. Otherwise, I know that I'm going to be an angry person, or I'm going to yell at mom or dad, or I'm just not going to be nice. And I don't want to be that person anymore. I was that person. I want to change and become a better version of me, right? I want to learn how to manage these stresses better. So all of this working through emotional, physical stress is really about gaining different perspectives and raising our level of skills and our abilities, both physical and emotional, and our problem-solving skills and our relationship skills. And we can do that when we're open to do that. So I thank you for being here. Please, again, follow my YouTube channel, click below to like this video, go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com. There is so much help there. 3 absolutely free caregiver courses on how to manage care for aging parents, a course about power of attorney, what that means, what responsibilities are you accepting, and a course about guardianship if you have parents who have dementia and they can't make good decisions. How do you work through all of that? So my website's PamelaDWilson.com. I thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in another video.